Welcome to our Skin Cancer in the 9/11 Community webinar. I'm Michael Barasch, and I'm really thrilled that you took the time to join us, and I hope you'll find the information we give you in the next hour informative, and most importantly, I'm pleading with you, spread the word. You're going to hear everybody on this webinar keep telling you that, but please help us by paying it forward and just telling people about the health program and the Victim Compensation Fund. I'm here this evening with my partners, Dana Cohen. Dana, will you wave? Dana and my partner, Dom Penson. They run our family assistance team. Dana will tell you about that. And sadly, all too many of our clients are passing away from their cancers, including skin cancer. Also here with us tonight is Lee London. Lee runs the Victim Compensation Fund practice, in particular the personal injury practice. And also with us tonight is retired FDNY Deputy Chief Richie Allies. And then with us also this evening is Val Velasquez-Stetz. She's a retired Jersey City police officer. All right, so let's start with a short little video that sets the table.
The first thing that I hear from the non-first responder community in Lower Manhattan is, look, I'm sick, but I don't deserve anything. I'm not a first responder. I just lived here. I just studied here. I just went to school here. I just raised a family here. Your presence here was an act of courage and resilience. The first responders, I'm in awe, but I also am in great awe of those who came back to a war-torn neighborhood that was clearly toxic. We knew it, but you stayed anyway, and you allowed this area to grow and to become the hub. But it's your courage and your resilience that brought this place back. So please, I urge you, access what you are owed.
Over the last decade, we have all fought very hard so that everyone has access to the health care that they need. It is very important that every community member who lived anywhere south of Houston understands that you are covered. You are part of the group of people that have guaranteed health care if you have a 9/11 related disease.
I was on my way to work when the first plane hit. I was working for Goldman Sachs. I actually worked for them for a total of 21 years. I always thought that those programs were geared for the firemen and the police officers, but I'm one of the victims of that.
So we have taken on, with all of these advocates here, the task of trying to get everyone to understand that they have rights, and it is imperative that they sign up.
It's also critical that we reach our students and our staff members, our teachers who were in the schools 18 years ago.
One of the really surprising things about our research is that an event in 2001 can continue to have echoes 17 and 18 years later, such that it is as though never smokers are smoking 2 packs a day.
Our law firm now represents over 25,000 people in the 9/11 community.
The majority right now are first responders, but every single day we hear from more and more survivors because we're doing this outreach. Basically, to be entitled to compensation, you need to prove that you were below Canal Street or on the Fresh Kills landfill, either caught in the dust cloud on 9/11 or for 24 hours during the month of September 2001, or for 80 hours, which is just 2 full work weeks between 9/11 and May 30th of 2002. And you need to get 2 people to sign an affidavit attesting to the fact that I saw him. I worked next to Joe. I went to school next to Francis. That's all it takes. There's a reason why my firm takes all this so personally. I have 6 young people who work for me who have lost a parent or a spouse as a result of World Trade Center toxins. 9 people in my law firm, including me, are cancer survivors. The information you get from us is going to be compassionate, and it's our pleasure to help you.
Let's start with Dr. Greg Daniels from the University of California at San Diego. He's at their cancer center.
And my practice is mainly focused in advanced skin cancers, including melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers. My intention was to just give a little bit of an overview, because we don't all, thankfully, know skin cancers, but they're out there, and they are the most common cancers. Basal cells, despite being the most common cancer in the world and being literally right in front of our noses, sometimes it's right on our noses, we have more than 4 million basal cells diagnosed every year in the United States. And the incidence is just continuing to increase. And again, a lot of that can be traced back to environmental exposures, and specifically for both basal cell and squamous cell, it's directly proportional to UV exposure. So the more sun damage that our skin accumulates over time, the more of these basal cells and squamous cells are coming up. There's so many basal cells that it's become impossible for us to track them. In fact, we don't have a great database for them, so that's why I have to use a thing like greater than 4 million cases of basal cells, because we actually don't really know. The second most common cancer is squamous cell carcinoma, and you might have heard of squamous cell carcinoma of other parts of the body. Squamous cells can happen in the lung, for example, or the throat, but squamous cell cancer of the skin is the second most common malignancy out there. And unlike basal cells, it does have a higher tendency to spread. And so advanced cutaneous squamous cell has become, as the incidence goes up, more of a problem, and I'll get to that in a second. And then there's melanomas. So melanomas happen on the skin, but they also happen in other places where pigment cells are, and that's in the mucosal surfaces or the eyes. And melanomas spread early. That's the thing to know really about melanomas. So all of these have the same strategy, which is see spot change, see a dermatologist or a primary provider. Oops. So I'll talk about cutaneous squamous cells because, again, it's actually one of those that we do try to track in terms of numbers because we stage it. And I mentioned UV radiation, but also many other things factor into cutaneous squamous cell. Smoking. Turns out male gender is a risk factor for cutaneous squamous cell. It may, be confounded by the fact that men are accumulating more UV damage than women typically, because as not to stereotype completely, but men tend not to wear sunscreen as much as females, or pay attention to their skin as much. Medications is a huge area where we're seeing the influence of, say, treating one healthcare problem and then finding out that it's influencing the balance of power in our skin, and we're seeing cutaneous squamous cells come up due to some medications, as well as the overlap with other medical conditions, such as diabetes, for example, is a risk factor for developing more skin cancers. And when it does get advanced, because I think sometimes basal cells and squamous cells are a little bit underrated, ignored, if you will, for being serious diseases, but in advanced cutaneous squamous cell, people are dying. And again, it's kind of tragic. It's not that we have to send people to colonoscopy to discover a skin cancer. It's more just paying attention to your skin. So again, just some backgrounds on the biology of both basal cells and squamous cells, and even melanomas, is that some of the things that we've learned about them have given us insights into therapies, and that is that they're highly mutated tumors, which a proportion of them have inflammation as part of how they're growing up, of an advanced cutaneous squamous cell, where This gentleman unfortunately had a tumor that crept under the skin, and this can happen. At the time of presentation, we didn't have great therapies, and he ended up having antibody infusions of a medication that blocks the growth, but it didn't really work too well, and it gave him side effects. Ended up having some palliative radiation, but he just continued to progress. But understanding kind of the biology as research goes on, what we realized was that if you target those immune cells that are sitting there not recognizing the tumor, and this is just an example of a drug that probably most people have heard of, pembrolizumab, otherwise known as Keytruda, the Jimmy Carter drug in melanoma. And he got just a few doses of this stuff before he came back in and said, "This stuff is magic." And really has changed a disease before, advanced cutaneous squamous cell, that was not really treatable outside of surgery and radiation, to now for a lot, not all patients, some better treatment options. And so he had a few years of good disease control with that therapy. Melanoma, that is also increasing every year. You just see kind of the age distribution there. We think of it as all these skin cancers as being common in older people, but I'll just say that one of the fastest growing people are ages 20 to 40 that are women, that the incidence is going up there. And so every year we see more and more cases of melanoma. And for a while, our death rates were going up. But because of the science of trying to understand things over the last decade, a lot of great work has changed that bottom curve. We were looking at outcomes with old style chemotherapies and looking at survival over time, and that's actually months. That at each iteration of our understanding, whether it's immune therapies or targeted therapies, we've been able to raise the survival up, and actually getting to a point where almost the majority of metastatic melanoma patients can expect to respond to current therapies and to have hopefully years of disease control. Totally remains challenges, and that's why I circle that 40% where we're struggling for advanced disease. What we want to do is to not have advanced disease, to figure out ways of getting people in early, to taking those steps to either prevent cancer from the beginning, healthy lifestyles, or early detection where it can be taken off. And that just takes a little bit of recognition of what these tumors look like.
So I thought that was really interesting. Dr. Daniels said something, obviously we all know we shouldn't be out in the sun. I mean, I'm 66 years old, and my mother used to send me outside and say, "Hey, get some color and put some baby lotion on." And in those days, nobody knew. Now we know. But as you're about to hear from our next two speakers, there is a presumption, no matter how much baby oil you used or how much sun exposure you had, the presumption is that all three of these skin cancers were caused by, certainly exacerbated by your exposure to the toxic dust. So Val, thank you for joining us today. Val, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you were exposed to the toxins.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Retired from Jersey City Police Department, and I was a responder during 9/11 and going over there several times with my department. And I was exposed, obviously, to toxins as well. And in 2007, when my daughter was just born, I had a small tag between my eye and my nose, and I just thought it was a tag. Being a woman, you just want that off your face. So I just went to a dermatologist, didn't think anything about cancer, and definitely not about 9/11 as well. So, he called me 2 weeks later and told me that it was basal cell carcinoma, and I never heard of that in my life. So nobody in my family has it, never heard of it. So I was pretty much in shock because I had a newborn baby, and it was very scary. And so they were able to remove it, and now I just have to get checked every year. And then to find out through Michael Barasch that it's 9/11, it's caused by 9/11 exposure. So, it was just really shocking to me. And I just recommend everybody to get checked and to get their skin checked, go to a dermatologist, let them know that you're a 9/11 responder, and to do a full skin scan. And it's really, really important. I can't stress it. I just actually helped somebody else recently that I told him to go to a dermatologist, and he said, no, I'm fine. I don't have anything. And he called me back and thanked me a million times because he has melanoma, actually, which is really scary.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'll get back to you in a minute, Val, but that makes me think of a story that Richie is going to tell. Richie, tell us a little bit about your own personal story and about talking to someone about the importance of getting a skin check out and how important it was to him.
Sure. So like Val was a 9/11 first responder at the time, FDNY battalion chief. So I had extensive exposure at the ground zero. And unlike Val, I'm very fair skinned. So, we, as Michael alluded to earlier, the pH of the toxins is the same as Drano. Everyone knows, sun exposure can cause skin cancer. So people like Val, or even darker skinned people, African Americans, would think that they're invulnerable to this, and they're not. So we had a first responder, an FDNY chief, dark skinned, Italian, very dark skinned, and he developed a rash on his arm. So he had heard our lectures, so figured that was a good time to go to the dermatologist. He wasn't worried about skin cancer, he's worried about this rash that's on his arm. So he goes to the dermatologist, and the rash turned out to be just that, a rash. But the doctor, in giving him an examination, noticed a slight discoloration on one of his fingernails. He didn't like it, went and did a biopsy. The biopsy came back, and not only was it skin cancer, it was melanoma, the most aggressive form of skin cancer. They had to cut the tip of his finger off. He had to undergo chemo, but it's a good ending to the story is that he's alive and well. Had he not developed that rash, he's a person that would have never gone, to a dermatologist on his own. I mean, he's actually in perfect health. The guy's a marathoner. So, and then, myself, just like Val, skin cancer survivor, I had developed basal cell carcinoma unbeknownst to me back in 2010. I was still active in the FDNY. I was at my annual medical exam at FDNY. Half of it is a regular exam. The other half is a World Trade Center. And I want to point out that the World Trade Center Health Program doesn't screen for skin cancer. So it's very important, even though the Victim Compensation Fund compensates for it. So anyway, the doctor just happened to notice, looking at me, noticed something, on my neck, and made a suggestion that I go to a dermatologist. I had never been to a dermatologist before, and I'm looking at it. I'm shaving every day. I didn't notice anything, but you know what? I went, and turns out it was basal cell, and I'd had it for a while. So when they did the mole surgery, that's what they call. They go in. They don't want to go, too aggressively at first. It's a stage kind of, surgery. They had to go in 4 different times, and I ended up with a good 6-inch scar on my neck. Had I gone earlier, could have saved myself a lot of grief. But again, at least, I'm a survivor of that because it was non-melanoma. Now I go, twice a year for an exam, just to make sure everything is okay.
Well, Richie, thank you for sharing your story. We're now going to hear from someone from the American Cancer Society. And then, Richie, I'm going to come back to you to talk about the World Trade Center Health Program.
I'm so happy to be here today to share about what the American Cancer Society, what we do, who we are, and how we can help you or your loved ones. So our mission is to save lives, celebrate lives, and lead the fight for a world without cancer. So what does that mean? So we are fundraising for all of those different things, and where those funds go and how we are able to help everyone comes out in a lot of different ways. And the first way is via information. So we have our national Cancer Information Center, which is one of the largest gatherings of cancer information that's free to access. So you can call us 24 hours a day. You can visit our website 24 hours a day. The number, it's 1-800-227-2345. Most of our calls come in between midnight and 4 a.m. because people are up at night. They don't know where to go. They're looking at all these things online, and they need someone to call and talk to. And we have real live people 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to talk in over 200 different languages and talk about so many different things. So you can call and get information on specific cancers, treatment options, side effects, coping with cancer, medicines, pain control, clinical trials, prevention, screening, all these different things, live people that are experts. So if you just got back from a treatment and you have, side effects that are going on and you just need someone to talk to, you can call us and we're there to answer the phone. We have resources, so tobacco cessation programs with patient services, patient navigation, support groups, medical equipment. We can get you access to free wigs and prostheses and head coverings. Lodging is another big thing. So the office that I work out of on 32nd Street is a Hope Lodge. A Hope Lodge, we have over 25 across the country. They are basically hotels that cancer patients and their families, their caregiver, can stay at for free for as long as they need to. But that's just the surface level of everything that ACS does.
I mean, it's just an amazing, amazing institution, and we are proud to support them. Richie, I want to get back to you. Will you please speak to this map and tell us the difference between the requirements between the health program and the victim fund, and then talk to us about the health program.
Sure. So when I was still active FDNY and a lobbyist, for getting this law passed, and it was a pipe dream for a long time. For me personally, I felt that the most important component was the health program. Compensation, absolutely very important to the surviving families and for those members that are sick and dying. But the health program in and of itself saves lives. So the map here, in all of I won't bother you with the politics of coming up with a contamination zone, but when the law was finally passed and the boundaries were established, the areas in Manhattan south of Houston Street to Canal Street entitles people to be in the health program only. Now, again, it's a very important feature. Anyone that lived or worked in the downtown area from Canal Street of Manhattan all the way to the end of Manhattan, or was in the Staten Island landfill or the morgue or any of those places there that are established in the law, are covered for both the World Trade Center Health Program and the Victim Compensation Fund. Now, being enrolled in a health program, what is the benefits? One, an annual, what they call a World Trade Center medical exam. Now, it's not a physical exam like when you go to your primary care physician for a full top to bottom exam. But what they focus on are 9/11 related illnesses. So it's a full pulmonary exam and also blood screening where they do intensive cancer screening. Any tests that need to be sent out for further evaluation, if it's age appropriate, they'll send you out for a colonoscopy, or if you're having upper tract issues, they'll send you for an endoscopy, which is the great forensic exam. Anyone dealing with 9/11 related illnesses, once they're diagnosed and certified, and I'll explain what certified means in a second, and certified, then any prescriptions that are necessary for maintenance drugs, which can be very costly, are covered by the federal government 100%. And anybody, even with private insurance, if they have prescription coverage, nobody has 100% coverage with their prescriptions. And actually, for the first responders there, or even the survivors, you never want to use, if you have prescription coverage in your private insurance or Medicare, you never want to use that insurance for 9/11 related illnesses, because they all have out-of-pocket expense annual caps, you want to use the World Trade Center health program. And lastly, the fact that this health program is nationwide. So what people forget, especially people in the New York area, they're in the program for several years. Then all of a sudden, they decide to relocate to another part of the country, and now they don't want to come back to New York to get an annual medical exam, and they give up on the health program, not realizing that all they need to do is simply transfer to the national program. So no matter where they are in our great country, they can utilize the same benefits of the World Trade Center health program.
Thanks, Rich. So Lee, tell us a little bit about the Victim Compensation Fund and how it works with the health program.
Sure, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It is so important that we get this information out there because I speak to hundreds of survivors and first responders in a week that have 9/11 exposure. And when I ask them, what have they been diagnosed with? What are you suffering from? And I say, skin cancer. They say, no, I don't have it. Then I say basal or squamous cell. They're like, oh, I had that. And I'm like, that counts as skin cancer. So that is the number one thing that I want to get out today, is that is a type of skin cancer. Even if it's tiny and it's small and your doctor took it out, that's something that the health program needs to know about, the VCF needs to know about, because that is a valid claim. If anybody has 9/11 exposure, and this is first responders, volunteers, survivors, students, and teachers, that dust cloud, as Michael was saying before, was filled with horrible chemicals that landed on your skin and takes this long to develop. So that's why, I've been encouraging everybody, just like Richie said, to get a full body skin check, because every time I speak to someone, if I spoke to someone in 2014 and they just had asthma and I got them an award for asthma, 5 years later in 2019, they could have gotten a skin cancer and I can amend their claim for an increased award. I'm going to go over that in more detail, but I want everybody to know on this webinar today is that you never waive your future legal rights. So that's why the fund got permanently funded and extended. That's why the fund is going to outlive all of us on this call right now, because it's extended to 2090. And that is why, God forbid, you get diagnosed with any type of skin cancer, and that includes basal, squamous cell carcinoma, and melanoma, we can move forward on a claim. And that is something that we want to make sure you are eligible for, because just like Richie said, they're not giving you a full body skin check at the health program when you go in for an evaluation. You can't assume that somebody's doing that. And because of COVID, that is the number one appointment people pushed off, is skin checks. So I want to encourage everybody today to get a skin check, a full body skin check. And just to know that, just like we're saying on this call, just because you spend time in the sun, or you're Irish, or your father had skin cancer, does not mean it's not covered. These are the misconceptions in the 9/11 community. It is presumed that if you have exposure, your cancer is covered. Yes, there are latency requirements, but the number one condition at the World Trade Center health program right now that is certified by first responders and volunteers is non-melanoma skin cancer. In 2019, with survivors, there were only 600 people certified. And now in 2022, I think there's over 1,500 people certified with non-melanoma skin cancer. This is rising, but the only way we'll get numbers is if we encourage people to get to the Victim Compensation Fund and the health program. Many of my clients with melanoma is like a teardrop. My wife has melanoma, I know it well. So they have to get the surgery around the condition, and sometimes that's very invasive and it puts you out of work. Many of our clients are disabled due to their cancers. So that's something that you have to be aware about and to let us know. The Victim Compensation Fund, there's something called a non-economic loss claim. That's for your pain and suffering. Skin cancers, as you can see from the slide in front of me, can range from 90,000 to 250,000. So if you get 90,000 for basal cell, and then God forbid, 10 years later, you get melanoma, we can increase your award and we can amend your claim. You never waive your future legal rights. That is very important to understand. Also, skin cancer can come in many different facets. So sometimes people have basal cell on their arm, sometimes they have squamous cell on their nose and they have surgery. We want to know about this. The Victim Compensation Fund wants to know about it. That's based on severity. Surgery, So everyone keep all of your records. Another claim that you can make to the Victim Compensation Fund are out-of-pocket medical expenses. Many of my survivors, responders, and volunteers aren't part of the program when they get their surgeries from their skin cancer. You know, in 2006, if you had melanoma and you had a big surgery and then you joined the World Trade Center Health Program later, you didn't know and the health program wasn't around. So keep all your medical receipts for everything if you're not part of the programs, because we can get that reimbursed back to you directly through the Victim Compensation Fund. Another claim that many people, that we make for many people are economic loss, non-economic loss claims. And Dom and Dana will go into the claims that we will make for the family, because God forbid people pass away from their 9/11 physical conditions. We can make claims for the family on top of the claim that we make while they're alive.
Dom, why don't we start with you? Would you tell us a little bit about the benefits of the Victim Compensation Fund for family members?
The benefits that the VCF affords families who have tragically lost somebody to a 9/11 illness, including one of the skin cancers, include the things that Lee was talking about before. They include awards for the victim's pain and suffering. If a person succumbed to their skin cancer, that's going to be for their estate another $250,000. And mind you that all of these awards are tax-free. And then there are a number of other benefits that are available to families. Any surviving spouse is entitled to a direct award. Any other surviving dependents, children, or other family members who qualify as dependents under the IRS rules are entitled to a direct award. There is also compensation for the loss of the services to the household of the victim. That person is no longer around to do things for their families, and the VCF provides compensation for that. It also reimburses families for all of their funeral expenses, whether it be something like a repast, the funeral home, the cemetery, monuments, plots. It will reimburse all those things as part of the benefits, the compensation that is provided to a family that tragically loses somebody to a 9/11 illness. And then, of course, if the victim's life was cut short while they were still working, then there is compensation for the economic loss that the family is suffering as a result of that, of their passing. So all of those are all, and you see them on this chart that we have in front of you. Those are the benefits that are available, and Dana will talk about what you can do for your families now, as well as talk a little bit more about that early exposure.
So the 9/11 community is at risk. The responders, especially so, the survivors, very much so. And so I'll reiterate that getting those skin checks for us is critical. The studies, as Michael alluded to recently, and most importantly, we have not seen a new condition added in some time. Uterine and endometrial cancer is about to be added. And so I know we're here to talk about skin cancer, but as members of the 9/11 community, we're keeping up with this latest science. And we now have the proof that to confirm what we knew all along, which is that those toxins were just so terrible, and they put us at risk. So finding a problem early is the best thing that we can do. So what are some of the things that you can do to help your family now, in case the worst happens? The first thing is talk to your family. Make sure your family knows that you were there, and make sure your family understands that they're entitled to benefits if something happens to you. Nobody's going to come to them. They have to know to come for help and to ask for it. So tell them that. It's very important that you register in the programs. You don't just do it for yourself. you do it for your family, because when you register and you're found eligible, that's an eligibility finding forever. And that means your family won't have to do that later on. They won't have to find witnesses to confirm that you were there. They won't have to dig up records. It's done, it's established, and their right to benefits is established. So get in the program, get in the health program, and if you get sick, apply to the Victim Compensation Fund. It really does have consequences beyond the here and now. And get a will. Why is that especially important for the 9/11 community? Because the person you name as the executor of your will is the person who's actually going to have the authority to bring a victim compensation fund for the benefits that the family is entitled to. So you want to make sure that that's somebody who you trust, somebody who you know will do that for your family. The will also does dictate where some part of the award will go. So you can decide where the award will do the most good for your family. You can do that through your will.
And thank all of you for watching. As I said at the beginning, the most important thing is that you be each other's advocate. You know friends, you know coworkers, former coworkers on Facebook. Maybe you don't see them anymore, but reach out to them. Let them know about these two programs and that you'd be happy to sign for them because you saw them. We're so proud to represent you and helping to spread the word. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Good night, everybody.